It was secret. No, it wasn't secret, but it was looked on as being a secret, you know. And I don't know why, because we were helping people, that was the idea. And no, it was never, a lot of people never heard of us, you know. RO what, you know, what's that?
The wartime role has really been recognised. The peacetime role nobody knew about. And it's difficult to recognise something that hasn't been publicised. When I joined, we were aircraft plotting and doing a bit of fallout. Then it became doing more fallout and a bit of aircraft plotting. And then it was all fallout. So you sort of matured into the way that the Corps worked.
We had an organisation that could detect the presence of nuclear weapons. We could tell anybody who needed to know where they were, how big they were, and we could keep a track of the fallout as it went along the country and give local authorities foreknowledge that fallout was coming their way and let them know when it had passed, should that be necessary.
I had to imagine what an underground monitoring post looked like. We were not allowed to go into the post in Northern Ireland. When I joined in 1972, worst year of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, all of our posts were strictly out of bounds. Some of them had been booby traps, some had been used as arms dumps. So I had to imagine, and these are the days before we had video and films.
We were also a master post. That meant that where you had a geographic grouping of 3 or 4 posts in a cluster, they would form a cluster that would be referred to, you know, as a cluster of posts, and one of those posts would be a master post. Well, I was and remained an observer. That was the title you held, observer, and then there was a leading observer, and then there was a chief observer.
Everybody had a short test as you wanted to join. When you wanted to join, after a couple of weeks, you'd be asked to do that test, which was, there were basic things. It wasn't to do with things you'd learnt in the Corps because you hadn't been there long enough. And if you passed that, you signed the Official Secrets Act straight away, because there were things that were not made public.
As far as monitoring was concerned, the information came in from the monitoring posts all around the country or all around our particular group.
I was at headquarters with the displays where the scientists would be to give the warning to the government and the 4-minute warning to the public, because from our information that was started off on the underground posts that would be transmitted, we would plot the bombs and where they'd landed, triangulated, and be able to get a map reference, plot them on the maps, on the displays, and then monitor the fallout.
So in the beginning I was one of the observers, and my job was to plot the fallout as it arrived on a large perspex screen. We wrote backwards. Airbursts were designated green symbols and ground bursts were red symbols.
There were two differences, 2 different types of bomb. If the bomb had exploded up in the air, it was an airburst, and it didn't produce fallout. The ground bursts hit the ground, dug a hole, scooped it all up, and it was contaminated.
There had been a nuclear detonation somewhere in the country, and we would have to plot that in reverse on a map of the UK, giving sort of location, power of the weapon, the time of the weapon, and the wind speed, I think, possibly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I, at 16, was responsible for getting a 4-minute warning out to Northern Ireland, which, when you think about it now, that is crazy. But we did it. We were able to do it. I couldn't do it now, mind you. I couldn't remember how to do it. But the triangulation I loved. I loved talking to the posts, loved talking to the people on the posts. It was always good We were professional, but there was that camaraderie.
To fail to prepare is to prepare to fail. And that was drummed into everybody in the Corps.
My day job was a 9-to-5 job. It was an office job. So given that Corps meetings for the post were Tuesday evenings at that time, that didn't really cause a problem. Exercises were on the weekend, so that didn't cause a problem. I was allowed special leave to go to annual camp.
The level of training and the level of expertise within the ROC was, I think, quite exceptional, bearing in mind that most of the people there, in fact all the people there, were volunteers apart from the commanding officers. The exercises and drills in the ROC, I think, were very important, and they were very realistic in terms of, how they were coping with nuclear fallout.
It used to come from the sort of the headquarters. The exercise would go over the whole country. So they did all the details that you want, and then you'd be opening things at certain times as certain things were happening in the exercise.
When we actually had exercises with the RAF, and that's when we would go down into the bunker. And so we'd go into their sort of general operations room, and we'd have a small corner of it, a small cell, where we'd have this map of the UK, the Perspex map. And they would be on one side, we'd be on the other side, receiving our information from our Bedford headquarters. And then we'd be plotting, and it was one of many sort of aspects of their overall information, but we would be plotting in reverse so that they could then see the picture on their side the right way around.
You used to lose posts or communication, which was the whole idea of things happening. If bombs had dropped around the country, you would lose certain areas, and we'd have to plan our way how we would still communicate with other parts of the country, which, being on the exchange in several times, I used to work out my different routes that I could communicate with other headquarters as appropriately if required.
Master test, an annual test. It was voluntary, actually. You didn't have to attend it, but we tried to encourage as many people as possible to attend it. It was a written paper with multiple choice answers to each question. Might be 100 questions that would go through the basic training elements, would go through standard operating procedures on the post.
The first one we did was in the cinema. We used to have flashes, aircraft, 50 aircraft go across the screen. What was that? And then you sit and do a written paper, in a cinema with cinema lights. Couldn't see too well, but the aircraft was quite a task, yeah, because you got on 2 seconds. What was that?
It was all questions to do with how you operated your role within the Royal Observer Corps, be it were a different test for people who worked on posts, and it were a different test for people who worked at Group HQ, because there were different jobs entailed. So it was quite an important thing, and we used to train hard for that, actually.
The 3 pieces were called the ground zero indicator, which is the white, basically a pinhole camera with photographic paper inside it, which would record the actual the actual burst. The bomb power indicator was another instrument which would record the pressure of a blast from a nuclear attack. And then you had the fixed survey meter, which was the instrument which would record the radiation post a nuclear attack.
And there were always usually 3 on duty. You designate either you're going to be observer 1, 2 or 3. 3 always had the unlucky role that in the event of a nuclear attack, he would be the poor devil that had got to come up and change the papers, as they said, the GZI papers, and then go downstairs and wash yourself off in cold water to try and wash any contamination if there was any. So
we did have individual dosimeters, which were just like the size of a pen, really. and they had a clip like a pen, and you just clipped it in your pocket, and they recorded the individual dose of radiation rather than the dose that was in the area, in the atmosphere. This recorded the dose that you'd received, and they used to measure it in something in a calibration called Rontgens, and it will lay down how many Rontgens you could have in any 24-hour period, and how much you could have in total.
The carrier wave receiver, when it was in operation, to show that the line, because you needed some indication that it was working, so it would emit a series of ticking noises, and it was called a confidence tick, and it would be on all the time. So whenever the first things you do when you open the post up, when you go to the post, would be to put the carrier wave receiver on, and it would sit there and it would tick away in the corner, and that's normal, and it would just do that. If there was a warning, it would emit a series of tones, and then that would be followed by a verbal message. For example, attack warning red, which would indicate an imminent event which was about to happen.
We were 35 minutes from being called out during the Cuban crisis. It was that close. Had Khrushchev not did what he did, it would have been another war, definitely. We were on standby, ready to go. You can only talk about nuclear war, but when you're actually that close, it's much more real.
I'm going to say World War III. If it had all turned bad, or even working up to it, we'd have been the only ones who'd have, if you like, the real information of what was happening out there, and to be able to pass the information around the country very quickly.
You know, I had no idea that at the time that the post was basically set up to survive for 3 weeks, and that was it. You know, there was no fourth week. I didn't know any of that.
There was always a discussion as part of the training, you know, well, if the balloon did go up, you know, how would you turn up? You know, there was always that serious discussion, and you could never answer that. You never know what you're doing or how you would react. Would you leave your family, or would they allow you to go?
I would have had to leave my children at home, and I would have had to, I'd made that commitment that when I joined the Royal Observer Corps, that I would leave my children at home and my family, and I would come on duty and I would serve my country by doing what was expected of me, what I'd been trained for to do, and that was to plot nuclear fallout as it passed across the country.
So on our post, we did make tentative arrangements for families to gather at a place that provided the most protection. We didn't take that overly far, but we knew what we would do. We knew, again, on a post you've got 10 people. If it's in peacetime, if it was at full complement, you only needed 3 to operate the post. So there were always going to be people who weren't at the post when anything kicked off. So we'd organise that they would they have the knowledge, they would look after the families of the people who were on the post.
It was the people that made the Corps, the friendship and the training and the expertise. And basically, they, you know, the work they did, although thankfully we never were called into action. There were 5 camps a year on an RAF station, and we were staying in the mess or the NAFI, and we all got together from all over the country. So there'd be about 500 probably on a camp on a week.
And I think that was one of the great things about the Observer Corps, that it brought people from really different circumstances, whether that's age, gender, occupation, education, and threw them together in a way that they all accepted that everybody had a contribution to make. And it was a real strength of the Observer Corps, I think, Royal Observer Corps, that it did that, and it did it so successfully.
People who have joined the Royal Observer Corps are those people that you will always ask to do something. You say it's in the village or wherever, they're always willing volunteers. They have that sort of ethos to help other people. And so it's embedded in the Royal Observer Corps.
And also I attended one of they had 2 or 3 royal reviews in the grounds here at Bentley Priory, and I attended the one in 1991, which was when it was the 60th anniversary of the RSC having the title Royal given by the Queen, by the royal family. So that was good fun. I enjoyed that very much. It was a nice day. It was in July. I remember we were out in the gardens at the back here.
We've been a close family unit. We knew a lot of people, a lot of friends, over 10,000 volunteers at that time, and it'd been our life. As I say, we only had about 2 hours off a week, we're counting all the meetings and training exercises and so forth. But it was lovely to go to Bentley Priory and take part in the garden party there with Her Majesty and the parade there. That we felt very proud, and the fact that Her Majesty was there to recognise us and pay tribute to us.
And not knowing what my future held as far as the Royal Observer Corps was concerned, I was told off one day to fly a Hurricane in company with the Lancaster and another Spitfire. And it was to fly over Bentley Priory for the stand down of the Royal Observer Corps, which was, of course, the guest of honour that day, and the reviewing was the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen. And so, in fact, quite unusually for Her Majesty, she was a few minutes late. So we actually flew over as she was walking up the red carpet to the dais. We were asked if we could delay, but we were already on our run in. So you can only fly an aeroplane so slowly. Anyway, I flew over.
The day that it was announced, it was a shock to everybody. I mean, we knew that a big announcement was coming, but we didn't know that it was going to be a total stand down. We thought it might be a reduction in size or something like that.
A bold, unexpected announcement, or just on the national news, and by the way, the Royal Observer Corps has been closed down, without benefit of any. Despite the motto of the Corps being forewarned is forearmed.
To be fair, the Royal Observer Corps never cost that much money. I mean, the government got 8,000 people in uniform, 25 group controls, 875 posts, and a warning and monitoring system that could prepare this country for nuclear war for about the cost of a jet fighter. But it was a cost too much towards the end. And
it was, in one sense, perhaps a slight relief that we wouldn't have that question that, had we been actually on duty when a real problem occurred, that we would have to leave our families. So there was that bit of relief, but also it was a shame really, because then you sort of tended then sometimes to lose contact with the lads because you didn't see them so much,
So literally, 10,000 of us were stood down, but effectively someone had forgotten that there were ROC people embedded into RAF and Navy, particularly units around the country, to be able to assist them, in that. So they had to bring some people back. And I was one of the lucky ones selected to come back. At the time, it was a classified number of how many people there were, which was about 250, we now know.
So before the stand down in 91, the Royal Observer Corps' role was to warn the general public of any nuclear attack and fallout. But the new role after that, it was, we had a biological and chemical element of warning and monitoring, but rather than the public, it was now for the Army, RAF and Navy. So a different role. There was still plotting, but it was different plotting. You had to know a bit more about the hazards of chemical weapons, the effects they would have, and there's a bit of mathematics involved in predicting where the hazards were going to go to. Yeah, and a lot of work had to be done very quickly to get warnings out.
You can't. We always talk about in Northern Ireland it was special people.
Yep.
And I think now, certainly from my kids' point of view, they don't have anything as close knit as what we had, and I think that's a key thing that's missing now.
It was a role that we practiced on a weekly basis for something which we hoped would never happen. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. So, but we were conscious of that. That we were practicing something that one day could possibly be for real.
A view that people had that somewhere in the background there was an organisation that were prepared to actually put their life on the line in order to actually report any nuclear attack upon the country.
It has played an integral part of defence, and warning in the country since its formation. From the Second World War had a big role. In the Cold War, it was always there. Shouldn't be forgotten.